He's finally here. Professor X finally joins Marvel Crisis Protocol. Hello and welcome to Syndicate Gaming. My name is Jim. This is probably going to be a long one, so let's just jump straight in with Charles Xavier. So, to start off, this is his model. It's good. It's not as good as Iceman, I don't think, but I mean this is Charles. Um they pretty much had to do the hover chair to make him work in like a combat game. Like I think more people know him in his wheelchair, but the hover chair makes a ton of sense just for the game. Like, I'm not super familiar with his era of the hover chair, but it works out well in the game. He's got the nice bald head, which I believe you can build it alternately with Cerebro, the like helmet he puts on. So yeah, the model's great. It's painted really well here. There's like little like battle damage on the front, which is a really nice touch. So yeah, model's great. It's a little simple, but I think it pulls it off. So let's jump into his card. So I am very excited. I can't wait to like start playtesting with him, but I'm also a little bit confused. So let's find out why that is. So here he is. Here's his character card. Professor X, Charles Xavier. Let's do a stat line here. He has 2 physical defense, which is not surprising. He also has 2 defense against energy, which I might have thought maybe that could be 3, but 2 is fine. And then he has a whopping 6 mystic, which is really good. I believe that's tied for the most with like Magneto and like maybe Cassandra Nova. I mean, that just makes sense. Like he is the mental powerhouse. He's gonna have crazy mystic defense. He has 6 stamina. He's a 4 threat, which is really interesting, but let's come back to that. He's size 2, which I think is also interesting because he's in that chair, which I thought would bump him up a size, but I don't know. It's not like a special vehicle or anything, so whatever. His size doesn't matter a whole lot. And he's a medium move, which I think is also really surprising. Like, I think all 3 of these numbers, the threat, the size, and the like move speed are all surprising to me. Because you would think somebody in a wheelchair would move slow, but it's this awesome hover chair, so I guess he gets the medium. Uh, so let's just go into his whole card to make some of this make sense. All right, so his first attack, Psychic Dart, is Mystic. It makes sense. Professor X is going to do Mystic. He has a range 4, strength 5, cost 0. Once this attack is resolved, this character gains power equal to the damage dealt. Okay, it's a builder. And on a wild root, so the target character gains the root condition if you get a wild. So root is the character must spend 1 power before using a superpower. So this is only the second time we've seen this, the first time being Shadow King, who is Professor X's box mate. So you're getting 2 of this new effect in the same box, which I think is pretty cool. And Root, Root is a pretty devastating status condition for certain characters, and to just have it like not cost you anything, you just randomly get it, can just like really shut down certain characters. So that's really nice. So this is a solid builder, range 4, Mystic, 5 dice. It's good. So let's move on to his second attack, also Mystic. Mental Suggestion, range 3, 6 dice, 1 power to use it. Once this attack is resolved, if it dealt damage, you may advance the target character its speed. Okay, so this is the same as his twin sister, Cassandra Nova. I think it's literally the same. Range 3, 6 dice, 1 power, you move them. This is really solid. Like this is a clutch part of his toolkit, and this is what you want to be using most of the time if you can. I think with his sketchy defenses, you don't really want to be at range 3 if you can help it. But if somebody moves into you, you're just moving them away. The only downside is you have to deal damage, which you should deal damage on 6 dice Mystic, but it's possible you just whiff and you feel really bad. But it'll work most of the time. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's just some like control that you can mostly count on. So now let's go on to his big spender attack, Astral Duel, also a Mystic, range 3, strength of 4, and cost 3 power. But you add dice to the attack roll equal to the target's Mystic defense, and the target character cannot reroll or modify dice in the defense roll during this attack. Okay, so I have thought about this quite a bit, and most of the time it's going to be a range 3, 7 dice attack for 3 power. They can't modify defense dice. And I think that's a pretty good spender. Like the like baseline for spenders nowadays is like range 2, 7 dice, 3 power. And for this you're getting an extra range and they can't modify dice. So I think if you need to deal damage with Professor X, it's okay to use Astral Duel and you're not going to feel bad about it. Um, and this whole thing about adding dice equal to their Mystic defense, I mean, just like the foundation of this game is that the dice on attacks are better than defense dice. So if you're adding four four dice on this attack and they have 4 defense, you're getting more out of that exchange, right? Like you're just more likely to hit. So this is a good spender. I like his like suite of attacks. It's varied, status condition, movement, just straight up damage. So like he can like pivot if he needs to, which is really nice. Professor X has this crazy leadership that most of the video will be about, but let's skip that for now. Move on to the rest of his card. He has a reactive superpower, Professor's Guidance. It costs X power. While another allied character within range 4 is attacking or defending, during the modified dice step of the attack, this character may spend 1 to 3 power to use this superpower. For each power spent, the allied attacking or defending character may reroll one of its dice. The superpower can only be used once per turn. Okay, this is good, and it makes him a like long range support character, which I think perfectly fits with Professor X because he's like the teacher, he's the mentor, he's not the frontline brawler like Colossus. Um, Having it be range 4 is really good because he can just stand in the back and give the support without risking himself. You can spend up to 3 power. Like 1 power for 1 reroll is pretty standard. Like, this is on Shuri, Arnim Zola, Sentinel Prime. You know, it's like the 5th time we've seen this or something. But it is nice. It is on offense or defense. And that's his only active superpower. So let's move on to his innates. Telepathic Lock. When an enemy character targets this character with an attack, it may use its Mystic defense regardless of the attack's type, unless the attacker pays 2 power. Okay, so we've seen this before on Mysterio, Enchantress, Ebony Maw. I have mixed feelings about this superpower. Like, it's really good in the early game because he has 6 Mystic defense. So, like, round 1 or 2, most likely, he's going to be using 6 Mystic. And they're going to be rolling 4 or 5 dice attacks. So they don't have enough power for spenders yet. So this is really good early game defense, but as the game goes on, characters are just more flush with power, and they will gladly spend 2 power to make you roll 2 defense dice. So, I mean, it's better than having nothing, but it's not super great. Okay, now his final innate, his final passive is the Omega level telepath. This character cannot be pushed or advanced by the effects of mystic attacks or enemy superpowers. Okay, that makes total sense. He is the mystic powerhouse. Nobody's gonna, go into his mind and mess with him. I mean, this is kind of niche, but it's also, it's solid nowadays. Like He can't be pulled by Cosmic Ghost Rider, who's like the big bad right now. Can't be pulled by Web Warriors, who are also really popular. Like, this is a solid superpower. Um, there's not a whole lot to say about it besides like he's only getting moved by throws, which speaking of throws are terrible for Professor X because his telepathic lock does not let him use his mystic defense for dodging. So it's like super sus that he has two physical defense and no like uh built-in brace for impact that you see on like Emma Frost or Ma. Like he just has to eat that size 4 that's thrown at him, which is, I mean, let's say you get a size 4 building thrown at Professor X. That's 5 damage coming in. The most you could block if you're super lucky is 4, so that's like 1 guaranteed damage. He's probably taking a lot more than that. Like, Professor X has some issues, and I think his team is going to need to help him out a lot. Um, but some other things that I was confused about that I want to mention before we go into this leadership, which will help him a lot, and with the allies helping him. He's a 4 threat, which was very surprising to me when I saw it in his article. It mentions this 4 threat character. When I read that, I literally like recoiled and was like, "What? Why is he a 4 threat?" And I I I have spent the day thinking about it, and I think it's because he doesn't go all out, right? Like you rarely see him use his powers to their max potential. Because like on power level, he's the same as like Magneto, who's a 6 threat in this game. So that's where I thought he would be. I was thinking they'd make him like a mirror of Magneto because they're such, epic rivals. He'd be this 6 threat mystic, but I like do like him being a 4 threat. It just makes him more flexible. You can bring more allies that he needs, that like that's his thing, right? Like he's not really a fighter. Like he trains other people to do it for him. So him being a 4 threat allows him to bring those allies and his students. So it like works out, but I am a little bit disappointed that we didn't get this crazy powerhouse Professor X. Whereas, if they bumped him up to 6 threat, maybe he'd have that built-in brace for impact, or like using Mystic for dodges, or, you know, flight. It's really weird he doesn't have flight when he's in a hover chair, but I guess it just barely hovers off the ground. It doesn't like take off. I'm not exactly sure. I never watched the show where he's in the hover chair. So, whatever. Uh, and then also, really quickly, I just wanted to mention art on the card. I'm not sure what it is, but it doesn't like look right to me. Like something is off about it. Like he has this weird line on his head that makes it look like he has like a metal plate under his skull. I don't know. And like the blanket is like so tucked in that it looks like his body just like vanishes into the hover chair and the blanket. I don't know. This is being very like nitpicky, and I probably shouldn't even say it because I'm not even an artist, so yeah, I can't really speak to it. But I just wanted to bring it up because I've seen other people bring it up, and it's like it's it's also weird on the injured side. Like his head is the like most iconic part of his look, and I feel like they kind of missed the mark a little bit. I don't know. You guys let me know what you think. Maybe I'm being picky and bratty, but that's okay. Okay, so let's move on to this leadership. Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, the Uncanny X-Men. This is a crazy leadership, guys. Like, oh my gosh, it's so insane. Okay, once per turn, when an allied character spends one or more power to use an active or reactive superpower after the effect is resolved, another allied character may gain 1 power. Okay, This is why you play Professor X. Like, I'm like not even sure where to begin because there's just so much you could do with this. So just like at a baseline level, with no other synergies or combos going on, whenever you use a superpower, you're refunding a power on somebody else. So like, you know, uh we're all used to Steve Rogers, where your first superpower per turn gets like reduced by one. I think this is actually better because you get to pick who gets that second power, right? And there's no like range restriction. It's very like freeing, right? And it's really easy to build your whole team around this. And when we look at the synergies with Professor X, he only has one active superpower, right? But Synergies is so well with his leadership because, I mean, he could spend one power during Beast's turn to give him a reroll and then give Beast power during Beast's turn. So, like, Beast could suddenly get an extra power out of nowhere because you spent one off of Professor X. That's just like a baseline level. And then even this triggers on the opponent's turn as well, because you can reroll defense dice. So like, yeah, you're losing power on Professor X, but you're putting power on literally anyone else. So let's start looking at some of the synergies and combos you could do. So just like look here, I've pulled up 37 characters that I want to highlight with this superpower, and there's a lot more that you can do. But like, let's just start with the X-Men, right? So the X-Men already have a lot of turn one shenanigans, and this just unlocks even more. And this makes me really hyped for list building because I love doing turn one shenanigans, janky combos. Like this is just like perfect for me because I'm always thinking about new lists, what characters combo with who, and this is just absurd. Okay. So let's look at an example. Let's look at Cable. So the main thing we're looking for with this in turn one shenanigans are characters that could use superpowers on their turn with no other help, right? So we have Cable. He starts the turn with one additional power. He has body slide by one. He can spend two power to place himself range two. Okay, so let's just set the scene. You start with Cable. You spend two power to place him range two. You give one power to Shadowcat. Cable then, moves to a point. He picks up an extract, whatever. Okay, now we're on Shadowcat's turn. She has two power. She spends two power to phase rush. She places herself within range two. Gives a power to Magic. Shadowcat can then move long once, be on a midline, grab that extract, and move away safely. So now we go to Magic. Magic has two power because of the leadership. She could spend two power to Limbo Step. That's exactly enough power to get her within range to single move to the midline, grab an extract, and move away. So just with this example here, we have two midline plays and Cable, who is like halfway up the board. And that's just like absolute baseline level, right? So like it's like the point I'm trying to make here is that Professor X, to like go off with Professor X to do the combo, you just have to start with somebody that could do a superpower on their own, and then everyone preceding them gets to do superpowers that they would not normally be able to do on turn one because they have an extra power. And it just opens up so many options. Um, so all those plays I was talking about, Shadow Cat, you can place to move, grab a midline extract. That's only possible because of first class, which says, you just play it during the first round, and then the X-Men do can do their first interact without spending power. So yeah, they'll end up with 0 power, but they could still pick up an extract and then move to a secure, right? Um, so there's like a ton of midline extract plays. The ones that I saw are Shadowcat, Nightcrawler, and Magic. And that's just in the X-Men. There's a ton of them if you go outside of X-Men. Um, I think Psylocke works as well now that I think about it. Is she medium moves, short moves? That should get her to the middle. Yeah, Psylocke is one too. Okay, so now let's just look at the other X-Men that can get the train rolling. So like Cable is a character that you can spend 2 power to place him to then chain power, right? So Cable can do it. Uh, Jean Grey can do it in the X-Men because she can just double move, throw a size 4, which is not ideal when that's like the first thing you're doing, but it's possible, right? Also, Magic and Nightcrawler can do it because they can just place themselves range 1, which to my knowledge doesn't like unlock anything besides just starting the chain of power. But like on Magic, you don't really care if you like waste your first turn in power because you set up your other 4 characters to do insane turn 1 things, right? Like I would gladly do that every day. The only real drawback is that like you're not necessarily doing like a midline play with your first activation, but everyone after that, is going to be doing huge attacks or moving around safely. Um, so now I'm going to go through some of these other X-Men that I like that are just like generically good with the leadership because, okay, so let's just start with Beast. So Beast, if you give him a power on turn 1, he can move twice and then throw somebody off of a point, which is usually only possible under Steve Rogers or, there's other plays you can do. But that is like a brand new thing to X-Men, right? Like they weren't able to do that before. And also I want to mention that Beast has a defensive reroll, which is really good because it triggers the leadership on the other player's turn, right? So you can just spend a power to reroll a defense dice you may not even care about, but you've now given, let's say, Colossus an extra power. So now he has enough power to Big Brother and taunt the next attack. Like this like so this leadership just makes you feel like a genius, right? Because you are like going through the plays and you're like seeing the matrix and you're unlocking these awesome things that the other player had no way of seeing, right? You know, like this is just gonna be super fun. And then Cyclops, you know, he has a defensive superpower, that he can use to give power on the other player's turn. Field Leader is a phenomenal superpower that he's moving people around. Um, we have Domino that can reroll dice on either player's turn, so she's also handing out this power. And hers, you even like, break even. You can spend 1 power to hand a power out to somebody else. It's kind of like the Black Bolt leadership. You're just moving power around, but you're also getting her skull counts as a crit, which is just crazy. We have the brand new Iceman that I did a whole video on, so go watch that. But turn 1, you can activate Ice Slide to like move up Professor X to get him into range 4 to start rooting people. Um, who else do we have? We have Jean Grey. She has a buttload of superpowers. She's always going to be activating them. She has a defensive power to get that extra power to your team. She's also a mystic powerhouse, which will come up with the Cerebro tactics card that we'll talk about. We talked about magic. Nightcrawler, you can either funnel him 2 to 3 power to move him really far, or he can start the chain. He's super flexible. He also has a defensive superpower. We have Psylocke, who can do the midline extract play. She can, move in and deal a ton of damage by rolling a 7 dice strike. She also has a defensive reroll. We have Rogue. You can activate her turn 1 charge. She has the power steal. I think Rogue isn't as synergistic, but there's a point with her I'm going to bring up in a little bit. We have Shadowcat, which there's something I specifically want to mention with Shadowcat. So when I was talking about Professor X as a character, I said he's really weak to throws and physical attacks. So let's read Shadowcat's Can't Touch This. When this character, an allied character within range 2, is targeted by a physical or energy attack or would make a dodge roll, this character may use this superpower. This character adds 2 dice to the defense or dodge roll, and then if that character is pushed or thrown, after the effect, they place themselves within 1. So Shadowcat can give Professor X 4 physical defense against throws, which is really, really good, and also really thematic. Like, I mean, they just nailed the design with Professor X, I think, because he is fueling his team to then help him in return, right? So like Shadowcat is gonna like protect Professor X. We have Cable who can boost his defense dice as well. Like that's handing out power to your team. It's giving Professor X that needed survivability he needs. Um, yeah, I think Cable and Shadowcat specifically are going to be staples in Professor X lists. So now Wolverine, he can't like set off the chain, but he's really good to get that extra power to, because he could move, best at what I do, to move again, and then he can play like no matter the cost to like Berserker Barrage. Like he has a ton of combos just like within himself. Really good. Then finally we have Storm, who there's another point I want to bring up with Storm in a little bit. So let's come back to her. And we also have Gambit, who also has this same synergy. He has a defensive superpower. He has a power during his own turn. So you're triggering power multiple times, right? And I think that's crucial to really getting the most out of this, is you're doing a superpower on both players' turn every single turn. You're just going to have a huge power lead, which is something else I want to bring up, which is like a newish thing with the X-Men, is this like power differential you can create. So I think another little sub theme they're going for here that's gonna protect Professor X is this like telepathic lock that it costs 2 power to hit his defenses that aren't mystic. And a lot of the X-Men have like wild triggers or superpowers that drain power. So like on Colossus, his strike on a wild, after the attack is resolved, the target character loses a power. So he could theoretically whiff and deal 0 damage and then drain a power, or even deal 1 damage and then take that power away immediately. Cyclops has this on his spender. Each wild they lose a power. We have Psylocke, who stuns before damage. And on her katana, she has this each wild in the attack roll they lose a power. Rogue just straight up has like drain power. So basically, what I'm saying is you can take power away from the enemy team while you're giving yourself loads of power. They're not going to have power to pay for the defensive tech on Professor X. I don't know if it's like what you should build your whole list around, but it's something to keep in mind that as X-Men, you can play this weird power game that we haven't really seen before. Um, there's a few other characters that mess around with power, like Deadpool, who I think is really good with Professor X, because like, he can place himself range 2. He can just straight up drain power again. I think there's something there with Deadpool if you wanted to try that out. So then there's one other point I want to make about this leadership, and it specifically interacts with superpowers. So that makes me think generally we want to be spending our power on superpowers and not spender attacks. So what I'm saying is, like, it's better for Professor X to spend his power on his rerolls rather than his astral duel. Like he would prefer his allies to be dealing the damage because every time he does his superpower, he's handing out power. I think I've said power like 100 times now, but whatever. That's the whole point of this leadership. Um, so now going back to Storm, who I mentioned we would come back to. She has the superpower Eye of the Storm. It costs 2 power, but during the next attack action made by this character this turn, add 2 dice to its attack rolls. So the way I see it is, that's basically like a spender, but you spent power on a superpower instead of an attack. So you triggered Professor X's leadership. So I think there's something there. Um, yeah, so like Storm has that, Gambit has this. Spends 3 power to add 2 dice. There's a couple splash characters I want to talk about that also do this, like Crossbones. He spends 4 power to add 3 dice. Like, that's not his spender, it's a superpower, but you're rolling an 8 dice strike with rerolls from Professor X. Seems pretty good. Um, okay. Um, uh, that was a lot, but I want to go into the splash characters now. There's another synergy that I think is really good with Professor X, and it's damage reduction. So let's go to the good old Beta Ray Bill, who's possibly the best character in the game, depending on who you ask. He has damage reduction, so he spends a power, not take a damage, and he gives a power out to somebody else. He's also really good at receiving the power from the leadership, because he's doing all these throws every single turn. Beta Ray Bill seems phenomenal with this. Let's move on to ASM. Spider-Man. So on turn 1, you can give him web swing. So you can go with Peter Parker. You can move long. You can place 3. You can pick up their extract if you gave him 2 power, and then you can move away long. Yeah, there's some pretty ridiculous stuff you could do. And then he has witty banter, which is on their turn, so you're like spending power, just getting it like refunded immediately. Yeah, seems good. So Baron Zemo, he's one I wanted to bring up because he has charge. You can unlock that turn 1 with his long move. He has Counter Strike and Master Swordsman. So this Master Swordsman is similar to that like spender from a superpower because you give him all rerolls. He also just like natively gives you rerolls, which is also really good. Uh, Bullseye. I really like Bullseye here because he just has like a free superpower. Like when he throws his knife, he can spend a power to deal an auto damage, but he also just automatically gains that power back. So he throws a knife, deals an auto damage, hands a power to an ally. I don't know, it seems really good. And then he also has this defensive superpower that I've mentioned. So Corvus Glaive. Corvus Glaive is like one of my pet characters in this game. I just always want to fit him into every list, but I think he fits really well here because of Glaive's edge. It's this spender, not spender thing. He's counting blanks. Like rerolls with counting blanks from Professor X is really, really good. I don't know. This might be the first thing I try. Corvus Glaive under Professor X. We have to bring up Crimson Dynamo. He has an action to gain 2 power. It's worth mentioning you have to spend a power to hand power out. Like you don't just net power from spending 0. Uh, but one cool thing with Crimson Dynamo is if you give him a power, he can then like keep the chain going by placing himself range 2. It's kind of like he did a short move. Plus, he has stuff on the other player's turn that can help keep Professor X alive. It's kind of similar to Shadow Cat. I mean, plus, he just generates all of his own power really well. We talked about Crossbones. Ghost Rider. So he's another one that if you really, commit, you can get his long move turn 1. And then he also has the defensive superpower dealing chip damage. And he's just natively gaining power, so he can just like do his superpowers all the time, which triggers the leadership. Ghost Spider, she has Lifesaver for Professor X. Seems clutch. Like I think if you're gonna play this team, you either need to be okay with him going down pretty early, or you need to bring defensive tech to keep him alive. And I think Gwen does like both of those things. She has Lifesaver, and she has Webline, which is really nice too. Like she could, I mean, like turn 1, you could fuel this, to pull somebody into range to then shoot them or do all kinds of nasty stuff to them. So Thanos is one that's pretty cool because he has Death's Decree. Um, Basically, when an allied character makes an attack, he can spend power, give them extra dice. So what that means is with Professor X, the character that's currently activating can suddenly have a lot more power than the other player may have realized. So, like, let's say you're going with Nightcrawler, uh, you you like make a like teleporting strike with Nightcrawler. You use Thanos to give it 2 extra dice. So now he's suddenly doing a 5 dice builder. You hand a power to Nightcrawler from the leadership. This 7 dice builder does 4 damage. So Nightcrawler has suddenly gone from 1 power to 6, like out of nowhere. I mean, obviously that can happen if you spike a builder, but it's just like a guaranteed way to spread your power around on your turn that you might need. This is a lot, but it's super fun. This like it's like gets me really hyped. I love the like list building combo aspect of this. Let's come back to him. And then Honey Badger, she's also an X-Men. She has a taunt on the other player's turn, which I think is going to be clutch to keeping Charles alive. Now, let's talk about Wong. I probably should have mentioned him first because he is busted with Professor X's leadership. Okay, so here's the play. You activate Wong first. You spend your first action to meditate. He gains 1 power. Please note that that does not hand out power. You have to spend power to hand out power, but you get 2 power to play Faithful Assistant. Choose another allied character within range 3. It gains 1 power. You can only use it once per turn, or well, a character can only be affected by it once per turn. But Wong is handing a power to, say, Nightcrawler. I keep coming back to him. But then the leadership can also give Nightcrawler a power. So Nightcrawler is suddenly on 3 power for your second activation. So he could teleport range 3. And I brought up Nightcrawler because of mass transit. Like Nightcrawler can spend 3 power to play this card. Choose up to 3 other allied characters within 2 of Nightcrawler. Place Nightcrawler within range 3. Then place each character within 1 of Nightcrawler. And then Nightcrawler gets staggered. So your second activation of the entire game, you can have 4 characters range 3 up the board. Well, actually, even further than range 3, because you put Nightcrawler range 3, and then you place them within range 1. That seems insane to me. Like, this doesn't require advanced R&D. It's literally just Wong. I don't know. It seems, I mean, maybe that's like more cute than good, but man, like, that just lets you like go steal all of their scoundrels, like go stand on their scoundrels. Yeah. I think that's definitely worth trying at least once. Like, there's nothing else in the game like that, where you just move four characters up the board, range three, round one. Like, I'm slightly concerned. I don't know. Beyond Nightcrawler, giving a character three power round one just unlocks tons of stuff, tons and tons of stuff. Like every character in the game benefits from that. And it's literally the first day that like Charles has been spoiled. So, I haven't figured out every synergy. I've talked to my squad, like my brother and my friends. And, this is just some of the stuff we've come up with. But as the game continues and as new characters come out, every single character you need to look at it and be like, how can they be used under Charles Xavier? Like he's that level of leader, which is really cool because he's such an awesome character. He's like worthy of this status, right? Um, okay, so that's all the characters I wanted to mention. I also want to briefly mention some tactics cards. I mentioned mass transit already, and I mentioned first class. First class just lets you do so much crazy midline extract stuff, which thankfully this card is not legal in the timeline format, or else it would be super busted, I think. Even in standard, it's going to be super, super good. Like, I think the crazy part to me is you don't even need to bring a restricted card to do this stuff. So you can still have brace and patch up. And yeah, first class, really good with this. It makes sense though, right? Like, he is the first class. He founded the first class of X-Men. Okay, anyways. So let's talk about his new, like, specific card, Cerebro. During its activation, an Uncanny X-Men character with at least one Mystic attack and at least 5 Mystic defense may play this card. For the rest of this round, the character that played this card increases the range of its Mystic attacks by 1 to a maximum of 5, add 1 die to its Mystic attacks, and adds 1 die to its Mystic defense rolls. Also, this character's attacks do not require line of sight and ignore the stealth superpower for the rest of this round. Okay, so this currently works on 3 X-Men characters, uh, Charles Xavier, Jean Grey, and Emma Frost. I think it's fine on Jean and Emma, but I have to bring it up with Professor X. Okay, he has this attack, Mental Suggestion, that says after this attack is resolved, if it dealt damage, you may advance the target character at speed. This costs 1 power. So what I'm concerned about, and what I've realized, I'm sure other people have, is that turn 1, you can do this mass transit play with Nightcrawler, move Professor X range 3 up the board, play Cerebro, which costs 0 power, and if you spent one of your other turns giving Charles an extra power, he can do 2 of these mental suggestions at range 4 that ignore stealth and are now 7 dice. And you're advancing the character with speed. So what I'm saying is, Nightcrawler has brought his entire squad up the board. Charles is pulling in 2 characters, and you're just murdering them with your other 2 X-Men or Cable, who's bringing up the rear. Like, to me, this is like a really good exception, specifically because he has mental suggestion. You don't even have to do it turn 1. You could wait for turn 2, give your power to other people, and then play Cerebro, and you have range 4, 7 dice, moving 2 people. I don't know, y'all. Seems really good. Seems really, really good. Maybe maybe I'm thinking it's too good, but like, you know, Deception you can even play around by standing within range 2. The only counterplay I could see from this is like you get lucky and block the damage, or you have something similar to Charles where you can't be moved by enemy mystic attacks. So that's like Ultron, Deadpool, uh Claw. No wait, Claw is energy. I don't know. All the like robot people like Sentinels and stuff like that. But Cerebro seems really good to me if you're planning on playing Charles a lot. So now let's go on to Xavier's Dream. When an allied character would suffer damage, any number of other allied characters may each spend 1 power to play this card. For each power spent to play this card, reduce the amount of damage the allied character would suffer by 1. So I mentioned earlier the main weakness of Charles is that he just kind of dies to throws or physical attacks. Xavier's Dream, you can save that once, right? And your team's going to have a glut of power because of his leadership. So this is giving him that like, extra lease of life, right? Like he could just stop a spike because like any number of characters spend the power. It's not like it has to come from Charles. Because Charles is probably going to be relatively low on power every turn because he's doing the rerolls. Um, but yeah, this just keeps him alive. It seems really good, guys. I'm thinking X-Men is really good. Um, to me, my X-Men, this does even more turn 1 shenanigans. Like you pull them towards Xavier, then they can move and pick up an extract. Like Shadowcat can do that really easily. But like turn 1, you can fuel all the power to Charles to move like multiple characters. Seems good. It's a very similar thing with Headmistress, but you just fuel the power to Emma Frost, and then you move a bunch of characters medium. Like, what I'm saying is there's so many like movement shenanigans in the X-Men now. Like, there's one of 4 ways you can do this. I'm not sure which one's the best yet, but like you could have all of the options open, and the other player has no idea what you're gonna do. I put Brace in here because I think you literally have to play Brace for Impact if you're playing Charles. Otherwise, he dies to like size 3 throws. It's fairly obvious. Mind if I cut in? So this is a rogue card that I had honestly forgotten about, but doing my research for this video, I found it again. And this basically just plays into the like power drain strategy that I talked about earlier. Because it says rogue can just play the card. This round, when an enemy character is choosing the target character for a non-area or non-beam attack, and rogue is in range and line of sight, the enemy character may pay 1 power. If they do not, the attack must target rogue if possible. So I think with Charles, they have to spend a power to even hit Charles. Then they also have to spend 2 power to get past his defense. Seems pretty good to me. And then rogue can be draining the power. I don't know. Maybe it's like too cute, but I think keeping Charles alive is really worth it. Um, yeah, I don't know. I've literally never seen this card played, so it like would be cool if it came up. Oh, I also want to briefly mention Children of the Atom because Nightcrawler staggers himself during this mass transit. And you can just clear it with Children of the Atom, and it gives him extra power to then be placing further the next turn. Wait, hold on 1 second. So that same turn that Nightcrawler does mass transit takes one of his actions. because it's the new way they're doing it, active action. Wow, okay. I just realized this. I mean, this is what I'm saying. There's so many combos and things to unlock here. So now with Children of the Atom, you funnel power to Nightcrawler or just use Wong, and then Nightcrawler does mass transit. He places range 3. He then plays Children of the Atom to take off Stagger, and he gains a power. So he now has 1 power to either place within 1 or do a Brimstone Blitz if they were close enough. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, he could even do Teleporting Strike, Puff of Smoke to place. I mean, he could go like all the way across the board. Wow. Okay. Sorry that's not well thought out, but like there's so much going on here. Okay, and then the last card I want to talk about is from Ebony Maw. And there's a very similar card for Scarlet Witch called No More Mutants. Basically, what this says is you can like counterspell an enemy superpower. They can't use it again for the rest of the turn. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is I was trying to find another card similar to Brace for Impact that could help mitigate Charles's really poor physical defense against throws specifically. And this basically just, I mean, it literally just counters the throw. You have to bring a 5-threat character in Scarlet Witch or Ebony Maw, but they're also Mystic powerhouses. You could have this cool like Mystic powerhouse team. You're countering their throws. I don't know. This kind of seems like a good time. Okay, that was a whole lot on Charles, but there is a whole lot to unpack here. He he is really cool, and I think he's lived up to his name. Like he is the original X-Men, the founder. He's in all the movies. He's played by Patrick Stewart for crying out loud. Like, he needs to have a good card. Um, so yeah, I think that's gonna be it for me. Oh, I guess really quickly, I don't see him being played a whole lot outside of X-Men or even under other X-Men leaders. Like maybe Cyclops to funnel him power to do more rerolls to then help you deal damage and hand out more power. There might be something there, but I think the real strength of Charles is this leadership. Um, so yeah, uh, please let me know what combos you guys find. Please put them in the YouTube comments. I would love to see them. I love doing this turn 1 puzzle. It's like my favorite part of the game. So I think that's it for me, guys. Hopefully you learned something, and let's unlock Professor X together. All right, guys. I'll see you in the next one.